And hello, Hearts of Oak. Thanks so much for joining us once again. And we are together, as you would say, with Alan Miller, a supremo off together declaration. Alan, it's always good to have you on. Thanks so much for giving us your time today.
Well, thanks for having me, Peter. Good to be here.
So, lots happening, and we've seen, obviously, if people are not following you, any of the War Room Posse or the US side, make sure and follow Alan. There is his personal handle, and obviously Together Deck is, and you can get the website details. Everything is in the description. But probably we've seen a U-turn supposedly with his government, with the new Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, coming in, comments about digital ID and changing that. Maybe you can, before we kind of delve into kind of what that means for those who own companies and where they're being pushed towards and the pledge and all of that, but where kind of are we in terms of digital ID being enforced on us from our masters?
Well, the thing is, it is really important to note that there was a serious option of having a digital ID card. Remember, they talked about a brick card that was Labour together. They were the big advisors to Keir Starmer, heavily influenced by the Tony Blair Institute. and uh, their goal, so the goal of a digital ID card was something. Had millions of people not signed a petition and lots of people around the country, hundreds of thousands, not done flyers and leaflets and protests and rallies and events. We did an event in each country running up to a protest in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland and London. But getting out into towns and cities and villages and getting people to write to their MPs and councillors, that was really important because it did. Otherwise, we would also have a digital ID card, which they're trying to do, like you have on the continent or elsewhere, which does nothing to stop small boats, all biometric digital ID cards. They've got them in Spain, Italy, France. It doesn't do those things. What it does do is create more of a biometric surveillance state. Now, it was recognized that it was going to become very difficult to make it mandatory on people. Then they tried to change the word mandatory, but make sure that it was still in place somehow. Andy Burnham has recognized this. He was obviously the person who was under Blair implementing the ID card. And he's made the point that, well, there was a lot of political capital and time spent on it. And he doesn't want the start of his coronation, only voted by 25,000 people, no contestation. It's utterly not democratic. We should have a general election. But that said, he recognizes that. But at the same time, they've made a very clear announcement, which is that they're going to continue with one login with the Gov UK app. They're going to extend. We're going to have a kind of one Gov digital government, right? So a one digital Gov. So that means that where we've seen things like under Liz Kendall, the Department of Work and Pensions, where they could just go into people's bank accounts, civil servants, no one of any democratic accountability, where we've seen the push to get everyone onto digital driving licenses. They use Australia as an example. Australia, New South Wales, interestingly, they've had load of bootlegged fake digital ID driving licenses. I mean, this is the thing. Many of your viewers will share the views about concerns about a surveillance state, but even those that don't and are skeptical and they say that sounds mad, we know that lots of bad actors, both criminals and foreign actors, are doing all sorts of things, right? First, you've got the black market, and the people who are scammers or hackers are always a step ahead, right? So they've got those things going on. So the criminals do it, and all of us end up getting a digital ID system. We have to verify to get in, fumble around, put our passwords in our digital phone. It's a nightmare, right? We know what it's like already, even with the limited aspects with private companies, right? Which is very different to the state, even though people say it's the same thing, because the private companies can't send the police around to start, like investigating you or take you to, it's a different relationship, the state and the citizen to private companies. But we know what it's like. And also data breaches. Hundreds of millions of them just in 2026, right across the board. Service personnel from Afghanistan, Jaguar Land Rover impacting the economy, Heathrow, blood tests across the board. And we saw Horizon and the post office scandal. So even if, and then the idea that this government is going to be able to have a robust system, we just saw yesterday 500,000 bits of data from the Department of Education, right, of our young people. Chilling.
But don't worry, Alan, we'll get an email apology, so don't worry, it's all fine.
Yeah. Meanwhile, while we're doing this, I've just seen another email from Companies House and others. They're trying to scare people, a bit like we saw during lockdowns. "You've got to do this. You've got," and I'm like, firstly, no, you don't, right? If you've got one login, if they're trying to push you as a director of a company, you can get an accountant who's an ACSP registered for a nominal fee, £50 or something, to register for you, and they get a code, and you don't have to do one login. It's important people know that. Now, that's still unacceptable. It still means we're having to do things we didn't have to do before. And that together, what we're saying is we must have the right not to digitally verify. 4 million people are not on the internet or can't do it, older people and others. But the whole of the demos, the whole of the public, the population should be able to use analog and other options. We're not against technology, right? We love technology. We think it's important. But the idea now that what we're getting is that you've got the infrastructure of one login, 8 million directors being forced, and then make tax digital. So people that are self-employed and partners and not limited companies. And then you've also got the Gov UK app, and in each department, they want to make everything digitized. And so that the idea is that you could just survey and track everything and everyone at any point. And they're saying that, well, it's going to be ring fence, it's going to be protected. But we know that already we've seen all sorts of measures. And we only have to look back at the last 6 years and how we've had things like a rapid response unit from the cabinet, or a counter disinformation unit, right, from the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, which has been resuscitated, which would be spying on people like you and me, on doctors, on journalists, on citizens. People are having these kinds of conversations, shadow banning people, censoring them, having consequences. And we saw that from the lockdown files and the Twitter files. We've also seen 12,000 people arrested a year for so-called non-crime hate incidents. We've seen that, uh, Peter Lynch will be arrested and commit suicide in prison, or we'll see someone will get 3.5 years for throwing a plastic cone at police. I don't think you should be throwing things at the police, by the way. But we see very different reactions on a two-tier system to people who are protesting in South Hampton, for instance, and indeed what we saw in Southport. And so this is all part of a situation where we've had a continuation of some of the measures. Don't ask questions, do as you're told, don't have different views. It might be low traffic neighborhoods with emergency traffic orders from lockdowns and fines and no proper consultations and do as you're told. And it might be that when you ask questions, you get a knock on the door, like we saw what happened to Alison Pearson, which we can come back to. But across the board, the idea that it's just a benevolent state, and it might even be, right? It might be. Let's say that it's, Peter and Alan and a few others, and we're really not into tracking people. The problem is, even if we go along with that, and the problem is, even if people who say they're not going to do it in different circumstances might decide they're going to do it, right? Um, if you change the variables, and we saw this, they tried to do this around the illegal migrant situation, and more people, and they'll do it around crime with live facial recognition. So yeah, but if it can stop crime, and then what happens is people start going, hmm. But the idea that everyone, the state and its relationship citizens, that everyone's now a walking barcode, everyone should be checked. Not that an Englishman should not be encumbered or interfered with if they are not under suspicion of having committed a crime. That's the precedent in English law. It's not like France, where you're guilty until proven innocent. People have fought and died for these things. They're really important and entrenched, and we need to enshrine them and uphold them. And the digital infrastructure that's being created, that's in place and being created, one login has already had, it's very leaky. It's had whistleblowers. It's had loads of data breaches. But the idea that you're not going to be able to navigate without effectively being able to verify digitally is a huge problem. That's true for any kind of curfew or social media ban. They've pulled back a bit on that. Again, due to the pushback by people from your viewers and other people, Peter. This is really important. People must not just go, oh, it's inevitable. Agenda 2030 from the UN. We know about these things. We know they're in place. However, we've shown in Britain that we can challenge things and stop them. We've done that with the vaccine passports, with the jab mandates. We've done that around Liverpool streets, and we've stopped some of the funding for that. We've done that with a U-turn on farmers and IHT, even though Andy Burnham now says he wants to do an IHT on everyone. We haven't won everything or everything that we've wanted, but in life and in history, right? The things we do now, also people look back on and they stand on that. We stand on the shoulders of the big giants, right? That have fought for our freedom and our privacy, our liberty. And there are various forces at play that I'm not interested in any of that. There'd be much more. You get your ID out, you verify. It's a technocrat's dream. Look, it's also simple, it's efficient. And we're saying together that we've got a pledge, and we've got hundreds of thousands of flyers that have already gone around the country to people, posters, people that are knocking on doors, talking in cafes and town squares and streets with people, big campaigns online. We're getting everyone to sign the pledge and share it with friends, post it, and send it to Andy Burnham and say, look, this is not over. We're not happy with the fact you've retained these things. And actually, you're saying your government is now going to implement some of these things at speed. And to make sure that that message is clear, because look, quite a lot of people, unless life's busy, things are going on. Some people might think, well, that's just all over now. And it's clearly not. But it's also important that, because some people say, oh, you idiots, you fools, you sheep, you just falling for it. It's not very inspiring way to encourage people to be engaged in our opinion, right? People are at different spots, at different places. They've got a lot of different things to juggle, cost of living, other issues. I mean, yeah, people are interested in other things in life. They're not necessarily like us. We're a bit like train spotters on these things, but we've all got a responsibility to talk to our friends and family and workplace people and people we don't agree with, right? And this issue on digital ID is a lot easier to talk to people we don't agree with, right? On a whole host of issues. I mean, frankly, there's a lot of people that I really disagree with on pretty much everything that we might agree on this issue about, right? And we need to we need to take the wins where they count and keep pushing against it, because, we've got a situation where the Bank of International Settlements, the CEO said, look, central bank digital currency, it'll be great. We can track every single transaction. There are obviously concerns about a situation where you can fine people, you can lock them out. We've seen debanking, people being debanked for their political views. If you can't bank, it's like free speech. You can't really operate freely in society. And so we are saying we need to have protections. Like you need a warrant to go into someone's home or to tap their phone. We know there's a digital arena. It's a fast-paced environment, but we need to make sure we've got enshrined protections that you can't just have a burgeoning, huge, all-engulfing surveillance biometric state and no restrictions, no options for people not to do that. We must retain that, and that's part of the pledge. And also, don't ID the internet and their campaigns at togetherdeclaration.org that we're encouraging people to be involved in.
Can I? So the pledge, and we'll have the link in the description, or you just go to togetherdeclaration.org, I think /pledge, or and that's one thing I think everyone can do while you're watching this. You can just go and sign that and show with a mass of people join that group and oppose it, and that's how we win. But Alan, we'll come back to that. But Alan, what's the government always give us a reason for doing things? Normally, it's sometimes it's not true. Often they take a crisis and they use that to then bring in measures. And I know the government have talked for years about children's safety online, and that's why some of the push. Oh well, if we have digital ID, that's going to protect all children online, or it may stop the boats coming over. Of course, it will fix that. What have been the reasons? Because there has to be a reason to roll out something which is huge, which is expensive. It has to be sold to the public. So how have they sold it to the public?
Well, they've definitely tried it will stop the boats, but everyone sort of laughed and mocked at it because they're the people that don't look like they really want to stop the boats, right? But now this great, oh, look, we've got this silver bullet. People know that Tony Blair's been trying this for a long time, the Tony Blair Institute. The National ID scheme had billions spent on it and it never materialized. And then every option, he's taken the opportunity to try and say, right, let's have digital ID, let's have vaccine passports. This is really smart. Alongside that, absolutely, we're here. Well, the things that should send a shudder, we're from the government and we're here to help you. We always know that that's a concern. Um,
Scariest words ever.
yeah, and also that we're here to keep you safe. Now, if the last 6 years have not demonstrated, look, we got Dr. Fauci is currently been in the hearings, taking the Fifth Amendment, refusing to speak. You couldn't shut that guy up, right, for ages. offering people, threatening people, take the jab, lockdowns. This is the way you must do it. Have a slice of pizza. Now, all of a sudden, he doesn't want to contradict himself, so he's being silent. But it's coming out, right? This stuff, like the lockdown files and the Twitter files. And, you know, it was really interesting. We did a debate with Labour together at the Battle of Ideas, and I don't think they quite realised what they were up for, because a bit like when Keir Starmer was doing his press conferences and people were clapping and cheering, he thinks that's the public. And, they think that, and they meet the public. We had a few hundred people. It wasn't all the public, not millions of people, but a few. And they couldn't believe that people felt so strongly about it. They thought they had this wonderful idea and it's just all going to be efficient. So there's partly they just generally, some of them think it's efficient. There are obviously people that think we're gammons and racist and nasty people, and we need to be surveyed and looked on and not trusted. There are obviously people, though, Peter, and I got to say this, decent, really fair-minded people who are just genuinely concerned, some of the campaigners, with children. And I think we all share a lot in common with them, right? There's some terrible things that happen on the internet, like they do in life. And we were talking like the rape gang, the idea that people want to protect the kids now, but they didn't want to protect the kids around the rape gangs. The Labour Party in particular voted against inquiries. That it should give everyone pause for thought when they say they want to protect kids. But there are genuine good people, some very close to us that I've campaigned with, that have got a different view on this, because they're like, something just must happen. But the thing is, they can't square the circle entirely either, because it's going to mean de facto it's being outsourced to big tech, and then it will mean this ID. Now, what they're saying is they're saying it's gonna be a curfew, and it's ironic because it's voluntary, it's a curfew, and it's on the phone, but parents have already got all the things they need on phones to limit things. They just need to do a bit of research. Everyone goes, "Oh, life's too hard. I've got 3 kids. I've got to go." I get it, right? But here's the thing. We're not gonna get turned into a prison island because it's a little bit more work for you to do on the phone. You're concerned about things, like you'd be concerned. You can't say, "Oh, it's all a bit too much. I can't go out and show them how to cross the road." Well, yeah, that's one of the responsibilities and duties of being a parent. Also, by the way, parents, of which I am, it's not mandatory to have a smartphone for your kids. And actually, in a lot of instances, it might put them in danger if they're out on the street. But there's a wealth of knowledge and opportunity and learning on the internet. Let's not just turn it into a whole terrible thing. So we have a responsibility. You might want to get them a brick phone or no phone at all. Guess what, everyone? All us parents, we all grew up without mobile phones. We went to the phone box, right? Be- Now, I'm not saying we should go back in time, but I am saying, yes, like they say, the campaigners, we do different things for adults and children. That's right. But if you look at the consequence of some of the ways you want to do it with a blunt instrument, this has consequences for everyone. So there are ways that parents and adults can deal with this to ensure that their children are supervised and monitored. And guess what? Yeah, it's a bit more time. It's annoying, right? But you didn't used to just let them watch video nasties in those days, if everyone remembers the 80s, anyone old enough. And in the same way, you couldn't just go to the movies. And now also, guess what? People who are not 18 go to the off license and get drinks. Kids go and get cigarettes when they're not 16, right? Or 18. We know that. Challenge 21. Yeah. But kids do it. But there are some rules. And so the thing is, parents have a duty and responsibility. And we've seen an attack on parenting by a succession of governments where the state wants to get involved with how they're doing it, whether it's about traditional values, whether it's about culture and religion, a whole range of issues. It's not the role of the state to parent, it's the role of parents. The state should get on with, we'd like some infrastructure projects, some reservoirs would be good, right, about now, and some energy security, and not, pretending we're net zero and paying much more to bring energy from elsewhere, putting us not just like poorer, but at security risk, and let the parents get on with parenting. And so I think that, look, if you go on Mumsnet, well, I really like a lot of my friends who are not in political life are on Mumsnet. It's a very important place, but this is where a lot of these discussions are going on. And I just want to say for the record, if you're a parent, you would have come across this in roadblocks, in other things, in other areas. There are a few terrible people on there that are trying to say, of course, they're trying to cultivate relationships. They're trying to do terrible things, get people off there and connect with them and everything. there are also terrible people out on the street. There are some terrible, it's not everyone, and everyone's tried to paint this picture that, it's not, but we've got some wrong uns. We've got a few more, as it happens, that also are coming through, and the entrepreneurs on the boats, that don't share some of our values and our culture and way of life, right? And people don't wanna talk about those things and how they're some of those, and if we're not insistent on those things, as well as protecting our borders, but also are saying in our education and in our moral web that this is what's important: privacy, liberty, but also decency. This is how we do things in Britain. This is what it means to be British. And we expect behavior and conduct like that, not a police force that has a two-tier approach where you go on and start cheering and chanting and doing all these things. You don't get addressed, but people fire the British flag and they do get in trouble. So everyone's got a lot of work to do around these things. But I just think that the idea that it's gonna keep people safe and children safe, it's not. They said that about the Online Safety Act. Yeah, a minute ago, we had the Online Safety Act to protect children. Then we found out it was the Census Charter, because soon as you, and some of us said it would be anyway, soon as you start trying to have debates, and we did one on the assisted suicide bill, which, by the way, is back on September 11th, and we're gonna have a protest outside Parliament, where we're gonna be supporting a protest by Fame and many others who are challenging it. They're relentless, right? This is the thing on all these issues. They'll just keep pushing, and oh, you voted wrong. It's not right. We don't like the amendment. They're going to keep pushing. So, unfortunately, guys, right? Part of this is us being robust and insistent, but that's not unfortunate. We get a strong public that keep using our muscles to fight back. We can really have an impact. And I want to say, like, I saw you. I know that you're at Unite the Kingdom, and over there, we were giving out flyers against this idea. You know, the response was incredible, and some of them are the people that we get out to, but obviously there are a lot of people there, and many of them are not. And you know that some of them are not necessarily as much online, or if they are, they're not looking at us. But we really want everyone to be engaged in this, right? Because the weight and the power of the public when it has its voice, and there wasn't anyone that I gave. We had a few thousand flyers. I wish I had a million at the time. And I never got anyone, not one, right? Usually will get someone saying, "Oh, no," but the response was so enthusiastic, and it's one of these issues, right, that the public are really very clear about, and it's what makes Britain particularly exceptional. And like our friends in Canada and Australia and elsewhere said, they said, "You're not gonna stop the vaccine passports or the jazz, but good luck. But you're never gonna stop that," right? Because of their experience. We said, "Well, we're gonna try, and we're gonna go for it." And when we did, everything changed. In Britain, we do things differently, right? And for a number of reasons, older institutions, some of these foundations, some of the whole points of common law. I know we've got all these endless rights now, but the legacy and the history of all of that, even the fact that our lockdowns and the police and how terrible they were, was not the same as being in Spain and France and Italy, right? Anyone could see that, or Canada, or Australia. And so we are, in a way, we can be a shining beacon to the world, right? They've already got a Digital Services Act in Europe. They're plowing ahead, the Digital ID, Digital Services Act, censorship. We need to hold the line together. It's of historic importance.
Can I going just highlighting the one login system and what this means, and I've had a number of emails as well. You need to do this, you need to do that. There's deadlines. It's about money laundering and fraud, and this is kind of how you help us. And okay, I'm against money laundering and fraud, so I agree with that. That's kind of how they pull you in. But one login, that is just for company directors, is it? But this is the thin end of the wedge. Then they want to rule that out and it be wider. Is that correct? My understanding.
It is, except that, right, so it is for 8 million directors. And when you talk about money laundering and fraud, it's not a big leap to imagine that some of the things that have been going on with some of the governments and what they've been doing over the last period, it's almost like taxation without representation, right? I know people have had a vote, but honestly, right? And that's why we've seen so many U-turns, and that's why, and Andy Burnham saying we're gonna introduce these things from the '70s. You're like, "Hold on, you've just been coronated. You need to stick to the manifesto at least, right?" That only a portion of British people, but everyone had the opportunity, and people should recognize this. Look, I know everyone was furious with the Conservatives, and rightly so, and they should have been punished, but you can't just complain when you vote in or you don't come out to vote right? And then you have a situation, and we're seeing what that means, and people need to be mindful of that and this as we're going through this next period, right? But sure, stopping crime, doing these things, and of course, it's true, right? Partly within all of these things, it's true that cash can be these things, can be a thing that can be used because it's not just, but it's also part of our anonymity, about our privacy and our freedom. We campaign with the Bank of England and the FCA to make sure we retain cash, we retain banks. These things are really important for people locally. We're losing all our pubs. We need to keep banks for people, not just older people, everyone. But it's one login for 8 million directors. It's also making tax digital is now meaning that if you earn this year 50,000 in income and you've got a partnership or you're just an individual, not you don't have to, then you have to do make tax digital every quarter. So you're now logging into a system that they've got that's tracking that, and then next year it's 30,000 and the year after it's 20,000. So even if you've just got one, not everyone's got this, and I know there's a cost of living crisis, but there's a section of the British public who might be in their late 40s, 50s, 60s now, that they were like, right, there's nothing else here. We're not going to have a pension. We need to get another flat or or something, buy a second home, to try and make sure that there's enough money that when we get old, we can sell it and pay for our care, right? Now, 'cause Andy Burnham's talking about social care, and he's not wrong that is an issue. The question is what we do about it. You don't just impose a death tax on everyone without a democratic mandate. But we do need to consider it, as well as what the family can do and what's going on with 45,000 care workers that we lost with the jab mandate, but not just that, what's happening with locums and across the board with GPs. These are important conversations and how we address them. But we need to, so now we've got a situation where, they're forcing a situation that if you've got a flat or something else and you might get like 20,000, 25,000 a month, means a significant section, they're gonna force everyone into this quarterly. There's some discussions about trying to make tax monthly. Now, we're saying you shouldn't have to do anything different. It's like a vaccine passport. You shouldn't have to do that. You shouldn't have to do that to carry on participating in the country we live in that we've never voted for, that was never in any manifesto. Peter, if they'd have said to the public, right, this is what we want to do. These are the costs and benefits. We know you've got concerns about these things. These are our answers to them. Now we've got it in a manifesto. And the majority of the British public voted for it. I might still campaign against it, try and convince people, but you'd go, well, look, the public's thought about it. They think the merits or the virtues are better than but they haven't done any of that. And they're ushering it in. And we don't have an Englishman's home is his castle, so you need a warrant moment. And so the push towards one login, we've got many directors that have joined us. We've got some, is really tragic, that have moved their companies from Britain, and like entrepreneurs that are leaving. And each time that happens, people used to talk about the little drip that would happen in the water and it would impact the whole world. Every time an investor or an entrepreneur, a real entrepreneur, not one that's coming on a boat, leaves this country, people sometimes cheer, think, "Oh, good, they can go there." That's significant tax. It's significant employment. Who else is going to be paying for all these things? And we're seeing it. What's happening is you're either super wealthy and you make a decision because you love Britain, you stay here and you know, you fund thing, or you're really, many people are on benefits and all that. And then there's a huge chunk of people who are just having to pay for everything more and more, not getting any. And then what are the prospects for their children? What's happening to our education system? What's going with health? It's crazy. So yes, there needs to be ways to make things efficient. One way would be to make the NHS less sclerotic at the top, less ideological, serve people at the point of need. Also, it's got to be said, we've got an issue with, it's not just this. I know some people say it's just illegal migrants and legal migrants too many. It's not just that. We've had some of these issues for some time, right? We've had an issue with sclerotic growth for a long time, sluggish growth. We've had issues that when you create a national health system in the post-war period or a national education system, you got population growth anyway, and you have a range of things. You've got a much older population, people live longer. That's a great thing, but how do you deal with them? There's different metrics, and there have been things that have been shut down, but we spend much more money on the NHS now. So we need to become efficient. We need to have be clear nationally about what we're gonna do with it. We also need to say it can't just be a free for all. You come here and you just use it. I mean, not being funny, recently in A&E, I've had a mate in there. He had to sit in a chair for 3 days around the back, and there were people coming in and being rude, and they're not. I mean, like, people are like, and they've got loads of families, and it's like you end up. I'm even second guessing what I'm saying because this whole idea that you're saying something that's not very nice, not very British, but you're like, hold on a minute, what's going on here? And people try and say that's racist. Absolutely not, because as it happens, my mate that was doing it happened to be a black guy, right? And he's like having to say to people also, don't be rude to the staff, many of which happen to be black and brown, but also white. So it's people coming and so we've got an issue, right? But we've had some of these issues before as well, because some people sort of go, well, you just solved that problem and everything else in the economy and everything else in the institution. It's not. We got to resolve the civil service. We've got to resolve each of the institutions. There needs to be a dealing with a situation where the millions are now on benefits because people aren't getting paid enough. They're not getting paid enough because we haven't got a dynamic economy enough, and the companies aren't successful enough. And also, the state doesn't invest in proper bits of infrastructure and not do the other things. And loads of entrepreneurs are leaving, and young people going to Dubai and Portugal and a range of other places. So, within all of this is just one more tack and limit and restriction that it has very, very dystopian consequences for surveillance and controls and programmable currency down the line. Um, and, fines and measures and
Let, let,
just
let me pick up on the surveillance because it moves towards that, and this all fits into. I think you realize the government don't trust anyone. We used to be in a time where actually there was mutual trust. You trust other people generally to do the right thing. That's kind of how we were brought up. That's how you understood it. But now it seems to be the government is watching you, ready for you to make it. It's like when you're driving, if you touch a one of those boxes, one of those yellow boxes, bam, you're going to be hit by £100 fine. And is that mm, lack of trust? But it's also then we realize we have a lack of trust because all the data go disappearing. Of course, the live facial recognition, you touched on surveillance, not in any manifesto. So no one told us we were going to be surveilled. And then this is all held by companies, private companies. It's normally like Capital or Circo. So if one screws up, then the other one will get the contract. And when they screw up, when goes back to the other one. But and we don't seem to have any control. Kind of our lives are being taken away. We've no access. We can't get that information. It's kind of, yeah, how do you see that moving? That the government controlling us, in effect, we become the product, and we don't have any say in what happens to us.
so we have to resuscitate the sense of active citizens with muscles that assert our interests and our rights and say, firstly, no, we're not going to do this, or yes, we are going to do that. That we, writing to an MP and phoning them and emailing them and then going to their surgery is one part. Sometimes people can mock it, go, oh, well, yes, what's that going to do? As it happens, we know it does a lot because between that and the counsellors and the stuff we've done with NHS Trust and others, that goes back to party headquarters. They then start panicking about votes and they know that there's a groundswell and there's an active campaign. And make no bones about it. They know this, right? And it's Cobra meetings and across the board. We've had many people tell us we've got people that are friendly that have been in different meetings, very high up, and the impact that we all have is really important. So I think that that's also rallies, events, get-togethers, things that you do on the street, giving out leaflets, talking to your friends, are suggesting that they do the pledge, all these things, because let's be honest, it's that point, isn't it? It's like, what did 8 billion people ever think they could do as an individual? You know what I mean? You got like the idea that we can't do anything, that 8 billion people say that, right? Or, we got, let's say, 45, 50 million adults in Britain, and everyone sort of goes, well, there's not much we can do. I mean, we are the many. It is our country. These people are elected on a part-time, on a temporary basis to implement something they say they're gonna do, not to do things to us that they haven't said they're gonna do. And really, Peter, it's like everything. Why are you doing this, right? People have to ask themselves, "What do I want Britain to be?" I've got friends that have done businesses and all, they're like, "Well, what's the point of having all this if this is gonna go on?" Right? People are getting much more involved in politics and much more involved in campaigning. You know, I was in an arena that was quite successful, and I was doing other things in entertainment. But there is come a point where you think, "This is my country," and I sat there with my mum in a garden during lockdowns going, "I'm not having them do this to us," right? And there's a continuation of this sense of just, "Well, we're just gonna do this. There's nothing they're gonna do. We'll try it out, and we'll play this little game psychologically here, where we'll push this here, a nudge there, a force them. They can't do it. A smear there, bit of police pressure there." No. And I don't wanna be too dramatic, but it's incumbent on us, because this is one of those moments in history that if we hold the line and insist on things, things will go in a certain direction and we can change them. And that also involves voting, and people can make their choice about who they wanna vote for. But I would say this, the choice is gonna be probably between it might not be as palatable to everybody who it's gonna be, but we gotta think about what happened this time round and what we've had for the last few years and what we had before with the Conservatives. And there is even discussion that Burnham's had that he'd do a coalition with the Greens, SNP, Plaid Cymru, right? One only wants to think about what that would mean, and he's isolated reform from this latest round of discussions. It's the wrong kind of people. What he means is the 30% or so of the public that he doesn't like the ideas, and I'd say it's much more the public that have many of these ideas, right? The silent majority. No, they're the wrong kinds of views. And I'm just saying, so when we all come to vote, it's obviously council meetings are important, by-election, but also generals, you know, we've got a few and if we can get a certain amount stopped and changed as well, I don't mean just do that and vote and don't do anything else. What we're always saying, and obviously some people will do that, they've got busy lives, but we're saying we need to keep campaigning and put pressure on everyone. We don't just assume that because now people say things. Everyone needs to have their feet held to the fire. We need to keep everyone honest. We've got to keep everyone accountable. But some things are going to be much worse than others. And what is going to be likely or not? And I would just, because I'm very concerned. Can you imagine that kind of coalition? I was just talking about what people's views in Britain and what they mean and how, and you just think, well, gosh, that would be a very, very different Britain going in a certain direction. And, yeah, I think so. So I think it's really important. I think it's important. What we can do is we can make our voices heard. We can make sure we get the pledge signed. We can send it to Andy Burnham. We're asking everyone to do it. We can send an email. We can send a letter. We can phone our MP. We can make sure. I know they're on summer recess, but they're still in their constituencies. And then we're going to have a big event in November again. We're going to have a carry on of series of rallies. We're not stopping right on these issues. They're really, really important. And we'd encourage everyone to be involved.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot, and you're right that when often you see MPs speak and they talk about, oh, I've had so much post about this issue, and when there are big contentious issues, they get overwhelmed by constituents writing to them. So please do, for our viewers list, please do write to your MP and express concern, and make sure you sign the pledge. Um, can we finish on just to mention it on some positive news, which is about Alison Pearson
Yeah.
getting a payout, an apology. And this was because the police came and banged at her door, the on Remembrance Day or some day after, and carted her off for interrogation because she had tweeted something, but no one knew what. All of that. But again, my concern is that the amount of people that actually don't have the publicity, because she high profile, well known, writing for the Telegraph, she has that platform, and that's kind of the least we expect for her to win. So how do you kind of see that win, which is good news, really?
Well, I think it's really important points. It is true that Alison Pearson is Alison Pearson and she writes for the Telegraph, but it's also true. And then when the police come and knock on your door and it's Remembrance Day and you're a little bit mortified and you've got family and friends and you've got a career, that sometimes it's a lot easier just go, oh, I'm really sorry. Maybe I was a bit like thin. You know what I mean? In the same way that people took a guilty plea for things they've put on posts before then saying no, or because they went out of protest because they've not been involved in the police and they haven't been involved in legal stuff. And they're like, well, they pleaded guilty. Yeah, you see in a police cell, you've never been involved in police things in your life, and you get all this pressure, and you get told, well, if you just accept this, it will be quick and it will be fast. Like Lucy Connolly, Or the tragedy of Peter Lynch, right? And something like that. And then a grandfather goes and kills himself in prison because it's like he went to a protest and, all of a sudden everyone's presented as terrorists and you've got this situation. So it would be easier even for Alison Pearson to not necessarily do it. But she had courage and conviction and commitment. And yes, you're right, she has a platform. She could write about it. It's got to be said. I complain a lot about the mainstream media, but fair play to the Telegraph on a number of issues for pushing these things, and with the lockdown files and the Twitter files, and on driving, and during lockdowns, and on something. They may not be to everyone's liking, but they have been very important on these issues. And she's been brave. It's been difficult for her. The Free Speech Union's been really good as well. They've been really, really important. I'm a founding member of that as well. And Together works with the Free Speech Union and many others, but campaigns around these things. Free speech is one of our key platforms. So she's been able to do that, but it should be noted, so the compensation is from the, PCC, and still she's got an ongoing campaign with the police, with Essex Police, an ongoing trial. So it's great that they've paid her out and made an apology for trying to protect Essex Police. We also know that 12,000 non-crime hate incidents a year, arrests in Britain, and even though the Met are saying they're not doing them anymore, but we know they're around the country happening at the same time, an Islamophobia sort of anti-Muslim, if you say something about people, protected rights measures are being implemented, blasphemy law type thing that we haven't had for a long time, from the Reformation onwards, fights against those things. I'm not saying people want to go around blaspheming all the time. The point is that we have free speech and the right to express and criticize and mock. Charlie Hebdo, right? And we saw with Salman Rushdie, too many people patronizing and facilitating the idea that I'm offended and I'll behave terribly, unacceptable from the 80s. And look where that's ended up getting us, right? We must be able to criticize openly, freely. So it's great victory. It's still going on with her with the police, but we've also seen knocks on the door for many people. We've seen a two-tier approach only recently, right? If you throw a plastic cone, the police, as I said before, you get treated very differently. People have been imprisoned for longer, 3.5 years. Some people have been put out on remand or have been come out for all sorts of terrible things. And some people haven't even been held accountable for the terrible things they've done. So what I'm saying is that we've seen that there's been a politicization of some things, and even about who was let out of prison and in the run up to Southampton. We should remember all these things. They ramped it all up. The Home Office, Brett Cooper, Keir Starmer, the rhetoric, very different, right? And if you look at what happened recently, and I know we've got to wrap up in a second, but Suffolk and the idea that these 12 guys, they fly a drone and it was a whole terrorist challenge to everyone. And yet, if you were to speculate about Anne Widdecombe, all of a sudden you were being irresponsible. But all of them got up and made all these proclamations. Andy Burnham, Shabana Mahmood, Keir Starmer. Well, hold on a minute. What do you mean a far right extreme? This isn't part of what Britain normally does. This is strange, right? It's not consistent. But okay, but everyone's got now. Look, I want the police to be able to investigate true challenges to us. But there's this obsession in Berlin. This thing happens, and they start talking about the far right when this Islamist does this thing, right? So you got a situation where I think we've got a. She's been very brave, Alison Pearson. She's consistently done that. I think it's enormously pressurized for people, and you need an employer that will support you. Because if the Telegraph went, "You've gone, we're not having that," all these things have consequences, and we've seen that with some people. Now they've begun to do some of the things you've been doing from early days, like their own platforms and everything, and that's fine. But we need to get the voice out to many people. And I will say, right, like it's got to be said, things have changed so much for many reasons, right? Shabana Mahmood is now saying things that 2 years ago some people would have got locked up for posting, right? That's because of all sorts of things. It's because of things like Unite the Kingdom. It's because some of the things that Tommy Robinson has done and said. It's because of reform. It's also because of some of the things of Restore and all the others. And now the Conservatives are having an impact in some areas on some of those things. And what's happening is everything's shifting in the debate. It's because of Raise the Flag and the colours. And it's a range of different things that are going on in this discussion. And obviously, in what we call the freedom movement, there's a lot of different campaigning groups and organisations. We work with a lot of them. We had a lot of them at our rallies around the country. things can be impacted and changed. Like, we not be under any delusion, but we need to get enough people to do those things. And look, it's not going to be kumbaya. People are like on the unite. I mean, I don't even like these terms left and right, but there should be a recognition that if you've got a common view on some things, that we have an interest in standing together on those things and fighting on them and winning those things, right? Because frankly, even if you're on certainly on the old left, but even on the new left, they don't want free speech, right? But you can't even they get upset when they start getting deplatformed and censored and pulled down and stopped by the police and all that. And the thing is, we'll defend people's free speech, whoever they are. We need to be able to do that and recognize, because if my opponent can't speak, it means I can't speak at some point. And that's the thing, and that's the spirit of Together. And I'd encourage everyone to be involved, and because we've got some distance to go, but we can do it. We can win this for the moment. You never ultimately win it entirely, because the Constitution and the idea of free speech is always being contested, right? We're humans. And then we've got things like China and all sorts of other things around the country and other nations that are not at all in sync with these ideas. So we could go anywhere, right? It's up to us.
No, it is. It is. Alan, thank you so much for your time and that you've given the viewers and listeners can go on togetherdeclaration.org and sign the pledge. I don't think there's any better place to go if you're concerned of this creep that we see of surveillance and digital ID. That is the place to go. So thank you so much for joining us, giving us that, and leaving the viewers and listeners with something they can practically do. So thank you.
Thanks, Peter. I appreciate it.